And at a very young age, he was able to assume power. He was able to do it. So obviously, he's a pretty smart cookie.
The problem is not that Putin is smart, which of course he's smart, but the real problem is that our leaders are dumb.
President Xi of China, Putin, Kim Jong-un, all of these leaders are at the top of their game. Mentally, they're at the top of their game.
Hi again, everybody. It's 5 o'clock in the East. No one is on the receiving end of Trump's praise quite like the dictators Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin. Literally nobody doesn't have anything that nice to say about anyone else. The criminally convicted, disgraced ex-president has so much affection and praise and love and admiration for the murderous autocrats that it must be upsetting for him to see his two pals on the world stage break bread without him today. For the first time in more than 20 years, the Russian president has made his way to North Korea. As you can see from the banners all over Pyongyang, he got a very warm reception there, a blooming alliance that emphasizes the two leaders' isolation from the Western world, about which the New York Times reports this, quote, "The deepening relationship between the two authoritarian leaders poses a particular challenge for Washington. The United States once relied on Moscow's cooperation in its attempts to curb North Korea's nuclear and missile program. Now it faces a Kremlin intent on playing spoiler to American geopolitical interests around the world. Vladimir Putin's two-day visit comes as Russia has received support and weapons from North Korea in its ongoing brutal war in Ukraine, and North Korea wants help building up its ballistic missile program from Russia. Recent NBC News reporting suggests the coordination between the two leaders may present itself in the form of an October surprise, a spoiler to the U.S. election cycle that could benefit ex-President Trump. From that new reporting, quote, U.S. officials are also bracing for North Korea to potentially take its most provocative military actions in a decade close to the U.S. presidential election, possibly at Putin's urging, the officials said. The timing, they said, could be designed to create turmoil in yet another part of the world as Americans decide whether to send President Joe Biden or former President Trump back to the White House. Quote, "We have no doubt that North Korea will be provocative this year. It's just a matter of how escalatory it is," a U.S. intelligence official said. That's where we start the hour with some of our favorite experts and reporters and friends. NBC News national security correspondent Courtney Kube is here with us. She is bylined on that extraordinary new piece of reporting in NBC. Plus, former CIA director, now MSNBC senior national security analyst John Brennan's here, and professor of history at NYU, author of Strong Men, Mussolini to the Present, Ruth Ben-Ghiat joins us. Courtney Kube, take us through what you and our colleague Carol Lee are reporting.
Yeah, so, as we saw there in that excerpt from the story, there is a belief in the Biden administration that there will be more provocative military action by North Korea this year. And I have to say, historically, North Korea tends to do more, act out more militarily in an election year. But the concern among a number of Biden administration officials who we spoke with is that it could be more and more at Vladimir Putin's urging. Now, we just saw a video of Vladimir Putin arriving in North Korea. As you mentioned, it was the first time in more than 2 decades that he's traveled there, but it's not the first time that they have met even recently. They got together in Russia in September. Since then, we have seen North Korea send millions of rounds of artillery shells, ammunition, and even missiles to Russia that have been used with effect in Ukraine. Millions of artillery shells in a conflict that, Nicole, largely has become about ammunition and attrition. So it really has made a difference there. The concern now among Biden administration officials is what comes next, if anything. Is it possible that in exchange for this large number of ammunition and equipment that North Korea has provided Russia, that Russia could provide them, North Korea, with military technology? Things like technology for ballistic missile and satellite launches, potentially even for their nuclear submarine program. But also, is Russia, as part of this burgeoning, growing alliance between the two countries, is Russia encouraging North Korea to act out more this year to essentially disrupt or cause chaos in the American elections later this year? Some of the things that officials spoke to us about are the possibility of North Korea carrying out another nuclear test, potentially sometime this fall. These are all the sorts of things that the U.S. has been looking for. But I have to say, it seems unclear what exactly Putin and Kim Jong-un are talking about during this meeting. It doesn't seem like U.S. officials are very certain. A lot of it still remains in the realm of speculation, Nicole.
I mean, Director Brennan, there is, in terms of what we know as a public, a pretty deep record of Trump's affinity for both these leaders. What, if any, nexus between sort of Trump admiring both of them and their newfound closeness exists?
Well, it's very worrisome, Nicole. Worrisome that the fact that Russia has enhanced its military relationship with North Korea, and those conventional munitions that North Korea is providing is really helping Russia on the battlefield, just like we're very concerned about Russia's developing military relationship with Iran. But this year in particular, I think is most concerning, and I do think it's prudent for the national security officials in the United States to be worried about what could happen, because this year is more important for Vladimir Putin in terms of the U.S. presidential election than the previous two. It's quite obvious to all that he has a preferred candidate in the upcoming election. He wants Trump to be back in the White House. President Biden has been a painful thorn in Putin's side over the last several years, as he has been resolute in the support against Russian aggression in Ukraine and keeping the NATO alliance together in supporting this. And so is Putin trying to think about what he can do in the run-up to the election that could, in fact, make it more difficult for the Biden administration to have to deal with yet another problem on the international stage? And so, therefore, I think our national security structure is going to be looking at what North Korea might do. As Courtney pointed out, a nuclear test, saber rattling, maybe shooting some missiles also in the direction of Guam. So there are a number of things that can happen. Yeah. But it's clear that I think Vladimir Putin is looking to do something other than just information operations, which he did in previous elections. And will he try to actually antagonize the Biden administration by getting some of these fellow authoritarian leaders to cause trouble?
You know, Ruth, when I think about the Republican Party's migration on Russia and Putin, and I think about the Republicans I work for, John McCain, describing Putin as a murderous thug, and then you listen to Trump supporters at rallies on tape collected, reporting done by my colleague, Von Hilliard. They don't think there's anything wrong with Putin. Tucker Carlson's there riding grocery carts around, talking about how beautiful Russia is. I can't fathom that the same thing would happen with North Korea, but it feels like that would be a mistake. And I wonder what role this sort of boiling of the frog, normalizing of our adversaries plays in Trump's authoritarian plot.
Well, one part is domestic, where Trump has been conditioning Americans to think that these kind of murderous leaders are actually preferable. And he's been helped by Tucker Carlson, who not so long ago said that leadership requires killing people. So he's been advertising Xi and the leader of North Korea as not only, the greatest kind of intelligent leaders, but also his buddies. And so the big picture here is that Trump is selling this idea that the world will be safer if he is president because of those relationships, the love letters to North Korea's leader. And this, of course, is his megalomania, because it implies when he says that Putin would not have invaded Ukraine if he were in the White House, it implies he has some sway over Putin, when in fact it's quite the opposite. But it's it's a deadly serious situation, because, there's too many of these people who are very invested in Trump coming back, both for geopolitical reasons, because they know he wants to withdraw from NATO and they could more easily do what they want to do. And then also for, we could say, financial reasons, that the flows of illicit money to these terroristic regimes can start up again if Trump is in the White House.
Courtney, I wonder what sort of back channels are being activated to reassure our allies in the region that America is not going to head down the same path with North Korea as Trump did with Russia.
So one thing that we've been hearing more and more over the last several months is about this strengthened and even growing relationship that the U.S. has with allies in the region, specifically Japan and South Korea. And whenever we ask about this, when Carol and I were reporting on this story over several weeks, whenever we would go to the U.S. and to administration officials and defense officials and say, how is the U.S. going to deal with this? We were consistently told, well, we're strengthening our relationships. We're showing on the world stage with partnering together for exercises and So it seems that's the way that the U.S. is really countering this is, okay, Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin want to appear together on the world stage. We'll appear with our allies at the same time, and we have this military alliance that's decades old. That seems to be the main way that we've been hearing about it. But I mean, I will say officials really are watching to see if anything comes out of this meeting between the two of them this week, because the concern is not just about could there be another transfer of additional ammunition, or could they talk about the possibility of more assets that North Korea could give to Russia for use in Ukraine. But I think there's more concern about what potential technology could be exchanged here. When you think about some of the things that North Korea has been working towards, like an intercontinental ballistic missile with a survivable reentry vehicle, right? The ability to fire a ballistic missile, nuclear capable, to the other side of the world. The concern here is that is Russia providing North Korea with something that could be a game changer? And I think that's really what the officials we're speaking to are watching out of this week.